The research facility's pristine white walls seemed to mock Lyra Winters as she hurried through the corridors, her footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. Another failed attempt at activating the ancient artifact sat heavy in her pocket, a small crystalline device that had confounded every xenorchaeologist at the Galactic Research Institute for the past decade. "Dr. Winters," the sharp voice made her pause. "I see you're still wasting resources on that primitive approach." Theron stood at the intersection, his iridescent scales shifting colors in the artificial light. The ethery scientist's four eyes narrowed as he regarded her, mandibles clicking in what she'd learned was disapproval. "The human persistence in pursuing failed methodologies continues to fascinate me," he continued, his translator giving his words a mechanical precision. "Perhaps it's time to accept that some technologies are beyond your species' capabilities." Lyra gripped the artifact tighter. 6 years of research, countless sleepless nights, and breakthroughs that led nowhere. Yet something in her gut told her she was close. "With all due respect, Theron, human persistence is exactly why we're standing in an interstellar research facility instead of being confined to our home planet. Ah yes, your species' remarkable talent for stumbling into advancement through sheer stubbornness." His upper eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture of mild amusement. "Though I must admit, your particular brand of stubborn has proven interesting to observe." Before Lyra could respond, the artifact in her pocket pulsed with unexpected warmth. She pulled it out, watching in amazement as its crystalline surface began to glow with an inner light. Theron's scales shifted to a pale blue. "Surprise," she'd learned. "Impossible," he whispered, all four eyes fixed on the device. "The quantum resonance patterns, they're stabilizing." Lyra's hands trembled as she held the artifact. Years of research had suggested it was some sort of communication device, but all attempts to activate it had failed. Until now. It's never done this before. Because it wasn't meant to activate for a single user. Theron's voice had lost its usual condescension, replaced by scientific curiosity. "The patterns, they're responding to our combined presence." The artifact's glow intensified, and suddenly the air between them shimmered with holographic symbols. Ancient script that Lyra had spent years studying danced before their eyes. But now it seemed alive, dynamic. "It's a neural interface," Theron breathed, his scales rippling with excitement. "But the configuration, it's designed for simultaneous connection across species. That should be technologically impossible, especially given the era this artifact originated from." Lyra stepped closer, her heart racing. Unless that was exactly what it was designed for. "Look at these symbols. They're not just about communication. They're about bridge building, connecting different forms of consciousness. A bridge between human and ethery neural patterns." Theron's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of intense thought. The energy requirements alone would be astronomical. The risks would be worth it. Lyra met his four-eyed gaze steadily. "Think about it, Theron. Every major breakthrough in galactic history has come from species working together, not apart. What if this artifact isn't just a relic? What if it's a key?" The artifact pulsed again, stronger this time, and both of them felt a subtle pull, like a whisper in their minds. Theron's scales shifted through colors she'd never seen him display before. "The human approach would be to rush in without calculating the variables," he said, but there was a new tone in his voice. "To take an irrational risk based on instinct rather than data." Lyra smiled. "And the ethery approach would be to spend another decade running simulations while the greatest discovery in xenorchaeology sits gathering dust. Sometimes, Theron, progress requires a leap of faith." Faith. He said the word like it was a foreign concept, which to his species, it probably was. A very human notion. The artifact's glow had settled into a steady rhythm, pulsing like a heartbeat between them. Lyra held it out, her expression challenging. "Then let me prove to you that human notions aren't always wrong." Theron's scales rippled through one more cascade of colors before settling into a deep, resonant purple she'd never seen before. Slowly, deliberately, he extended his hand toward the artifact. "For the record, Dr. Winters," his mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement, "if this ends in disaster, I will personally ensure that every scientific journal in the galaxy notes your species' characteristic recklessness. And if it works," she raised an eyebrow. "Then perhaps," his upper eyes blinked in sequence again, "I will have to revise some of my theories about human capabilities." Their hands touched the artifact simultaneously, and the world exploded into light. The sensation was unlike anything Lyra had ever experienced. Colors she had no names for flooded her consciousness, while mathematical concepts danced through her mind with crystal clarity. She was seeing the world through ethery senses, experiencing Theron's neural patterns interweaving with her own. Fascinating. Theron's voice echoed both in her ears and somehow directly in her thoughts. "Your consciousness, it's so chaotic, yet there's an underlying pattern I never perceived before." Lyra could barely focus on his words. The artifact had created something impossible, a bridge between their minds that transcended the usual barriers of species and consciousness. Through Theron's four-eyed vision, she saw herself bathed in waves of neural energy, patterns of thought and emotion that the aetheri could naturally perceive. "Your species sees so much that we miss," she whispered, watching the play of quantum fields that had always been invisible to human eyes. "All this time, while we were studying light and radiation, you were missing entire spectrums of reality," Theron finished. His usual condescension was gone, replaced by genuine wonder. "And yet, your human intuition somehow led you to insights that our most advanced sensors couldn't detect." The artifact pulsed between them, its crystalline surface now transparent, revealing intricate circuits that seemed to shift and flow like living things. Streams of data flooded their shared consciousness, not just information, but experiences, memories, feelings. This is more than just communication technology, Lyra realized, her mind racing with possibilities. It's a bridge between different ways of understanding reality itself. The creators of this artifact, they weren't just trying to help species talk to each other. They were trying to help us truly understand each other. Theron's scales shifted through colors that reflected his racing thoughts. To experience existence through each other's consciousness. A sudden surge of energy from the artifact brought a new wave of information. Images flashed through their shared mind space. Vast structures hidden throughout the galaxy, waiting to be discovered. More artifacts, more bridges waiting to be built. "There's a network," Lyra breathed, her heart racing with excitement. "This isn't just one device. It's part of something bigger, something that spans the entire galaxy." The energy signatures, Theron's scientific mind was already analyzing the data. They match anomalies we've detected but never understood. Hidden frequencies, quantum fluctuations that seemed random. His scales rippled with revelation. "We've been seeing pieces of this network all along, but never recognized them for what they were." The neural bridge between them strengthened, and Lyra found herself understanding complex ethery scientific concepts as if she'd studied them all her life. Similarly, she could sense Theron experiencing human intuition and emotional intelligence in ways his species had never thought possible. "Your mind," he said softly, his mental voice filled with something close to awe. "It makes connections that defy logical progression, yet somehow arrive at accurate conclusions. How do you do it?" Lyra smiled, both physically and in their shared mental space. "The same way I knew this artifact was more than just a failed experiment. Sometimes you have to trust that there's a pattern, even if you can't see it yet." Their shared consciousness expanded further, revealing more secrets of the artifact's creators. They had been a coalition of species who understood that the greatest achievements came not from individual advancement, but from true cooperation and understanding between different forms of life. They left these bridges for us to find, Lyra realized, not just to study, but to use, to help us avoid the mistakes they made before learning to work together. A warning flashed through their connection. Power readings from the artifact were becoming unstable. The neural bridge had never been meant to last this long in its initial activation. "We need to disconnect." Theron's scientific caution reasserted itself. "The energy patterns are approaching critical levels." "Wait," Lyra urged, pushing through their connection one last burst of human intuition. "There's something else, something about where to find the next artifact." Images crystallized in their shared consciousness, coordinates, star patterns, and quantum frequencies that would lead them to another node in the ancient network. Then, with a soft pulse of light, the artifact powered down, and the neural bridge between them dissolved. Lyra staggered, catching herself against the wall as her senses returned to normal human parameters. She felt strangely empty without the expanded awareness she'd experienced through their connection. That was, Theron's scales were still cycling through colors she'd never seen him display before. Unprecedented. "It was beautiful," Lyra said simply, knowing that he'd felt what she meant through their shared experience. "And it's only the beginning." Theron's four eyes focused on her with new respect. "The coordinates that came through at the end, I recognized some of the star patterns. They're in a sector that's been declared off-limits due to gravitational anomalies. Anomalies that might not be natural at all," Lyra suggested, her mind already racing with possibilities. "The question is, are you willing to risk another adventure with an irrational human?" His scales settled into that deep purple she'd seen before, a color she now understood meant acceptance of a challenge. "I believe, Dr. Winters, that I'm beginning to see the value in your species' particular brand of recklessness." The ship's warning systems blared as another gravitational wave hit them, threatening to tear their small research vessel apart. Lyra's knuckles were white on the control panel as she fought to keep them stable, while Theron's scales flickered rapidly through emergency colors as he worked to reinforce their shields. The human approach. He clicked his mandibles in what she now recognized as stress-induced sarcasm, was to fly directly into the anomaly field. "Remind me again how this was logical." "The artifacts wouldn't be hidden here if it was easy to reach them," Lyra replied, executing a dangerous role to avoid a particularly violent distortion. "Besides, your calculations said this was possible." "My calculations suggested a 12% chance of survival." His upper eyes narrowed, "which any rational being would interpret as do not attempt." The artifact they'd discovered at the Institute pulsed softly in its containment field between them, its glow strengthening as they pushed deeper into the anomaly field. Since their first neural connection, both of them had felt its pull, guiding them towards something hidden in this forbidden sector of space. "There!" Lyra's excited shout drew Theron's attention to their sensors. Through the chaos of the gravitational distortions, a pattern was emerging. A perfect sphere of calm space, impossibly stable amid the turbulence. "The gravitational equations don't support this," Theron muttered, his scientific mind struggling with the impossibility before them. "This level of spatial manipulation would require technology we can't even imagine." Lyra finished, carefully guiding their ship toward the sphere. Just like a neural bridge between species should be impossible. Their vessel crossed the boundary into the stable zone, and suddenly all was quiet. The gravitational chaos continued to rage around them, but they were now in the eye of the storm. And there, floating serenely in the protected space, was a structure that defied explanation. It resembled a massive double helix, but instead of biological matter, it was constructed of what appeared to be pure energy and light. Streams of data flowed through its spiraling form, and at its heart, they could see something crystalline pulsing with the same rhythm as their artifact. "The architecture," Theron breathed, his scales shifting to colors of awe. "It's responding to our presence. Look at the energy patterns. They're adjusting to accommodate both our species' neural frequencies." As they watched, a docking port materialized, perfectly sized for their vessel. Lyra guided them in, her heart racing with anticipation. The artifact from the Institute pulsed more strongly now, clearly resonating with its larger counterpart. "We should proceed with caution," Theron advised as they prepared to board the structure. Our first neural connection was intense enough with a small artifact. This facility, the power readings are exponentially higher. Lyra checked the seals on her environmental suit, then gave him a challenging look, having second thoughts about working with an impulsive human. On the contrary, his scales rippled with what she learned was amusement. I find myself developing an unfortunate appreciation for your species' approach to discovery, though I maintain it's completely irrational. The facility's interior was a maze of crystalline corridors that seemed to shift and change as they walked, adjusting to their presence. Their artifacts' glow led them deeper, until they reached what appeared to be a central chamber. The walls were covered in the same flowing script they'd seen before, but now it moved and changed, responding to their thoughts. "It's beautiful," Lyra whispered, reaching out to touch one of the walls. The symbols swirled around her hand, and she felt the first tickle of neural connection. "Lyra, wait!" Theron's warning came too late. The moment her hand made contact, the entire chamber lit up, and the neural bridge slammed into place with devastating force. This wasn't the gentle merger of consciousness they'd experienced before. This was a flood of information, memories, and sensations that threatened to overwhelm them both. Lyra felt herself drowning in the vast ocean of alien knowledge, while Theron's organized mind began fracturing under the strain of human chaos. "Too much," she gasped, trying to pull away but finding herself locked in place. The connection. It's too strong. Through their shared neural space, she felt Theron's panic, so unusual for his normally controlled species. The facility was forcing them to experience each other's consciousness completely, breaking down every barrier between their minds. In that moment of crisis, Lyra did something completely human. She stopped fighting. Instead of trying to process or control the flood of information, she simply accepted it, letting it flow through her. She felt Theron's surprise through their connection, then understanding as he followed her lead. The overwhelming pressure eased. The facility responded to their acceptance, adjusting the neural bridge to a manageable level. In their shared consciousness, understanding bloomed. The artifacts, Theron's thoughts merged with hers. They weren't just tools for communication. They were tests. "Preparing us," Lyra agreed, seeing the pattern now. "The smaller artifact helped us learn to connect, to trust each other. This facility, it's showing us what's really possible when we stop fighting our differences." Through their expanded connection, they saw the truth about the artifact network. It wasn't just about bridging different species. It was about evolution itself. The ability to truly understand and connect with other forms of consciousness was the next step in development for all intelligent life. As this realization settled between them, the neural bridge gentled further, becoming something sustainable, permanent. When they finally separated from the wall, both of them knew they had been fundamentally changed. "Well," Lyra said shakily, still adjusting to the lingering awareness of Theron's consciousness at the edges of her mind. "That was definitely more than 12% survival odds." Theron's scales shifted through colors that reflected both amusement and affection, emotions he would have denied being capable of feeling toward a human before their connection. "Perhaps," he admitted, "some things are worth an incalculable risk." Their return to the Galactic Research Institute caused more of a stir than either Lyra or Theron had anticipated. The permanent neural bridge between them made it impossible to hide the profound changes they'd undergone. Where once stood two separate beings, now there was something new, a partnership that transcended normal species boundaries. "Absolutely not." Director Ven's crystalline form vibrated with agitation as he addressed them in his office. "The implications of this technology are too dangerous. Neural bridges between species, permanent consciousness connections. The potential for abuse is astronomical." Lyra felt Theron's frustration mirror her own through their link. "Director," she began, "this isn't about potential weapons or advantages. The artifact network is about evolution, about helping different species truly understand each other, which is precisely what concerns the board." Ven's facets darkened. Do you realize what would happen if this technology became widely available? The entire social structure of the galaxy could collapse. Perhaps it needs to. Theron's calm statement drew shocked looks from both Lyra and the director. Through their connection, she felt his certainty, his growing understanding of why humans sometimes needed to challenge the established order. The artifacts weren't hidden to prevent their discovery, he continued, his scales shifting through colors of conviction. They were hidden to ensure they would only be found by species ready to work together, to trust each other despite their differences. The director's crystalline surface rippled with dismissal. And I suppose you believe humanity and the Aetheri are ready for such responsibility. Two species that were at war within living memory. Lyra stepped forward, unconsciously moving in perfect sync with Theron. We're standing here, aren't we? A human and an Aetheri, our minds linked, working together. If we can do it, others can too. Through their neural bridge, she felt Theron's approval, and something more, a growing plan. His scientific mind had been working on the problem from multiple angles, and he'd reached a conclusion that both thrilled and terrified her. The Institute's opposition is irrelevant, he stated, his upper eyes fixed on the director, while his lower ones tracked the room's security measures. The network is already active. Our connection has triggered a cascade effect throughout the galaxy. Other artifacts are awakening. The director's form crystallized in alarm. What? That's impossible. Our sensors would have detected. Your sensors are calibrated to known energy patterns, Lyra explained, catching on to Theron's plan through their shared consciousness. The artifacts operate on principles your science doesn't understand yet. But others will find them, just like we did. Other pairs, other species, ready to take the next step. I'm shutting this down now. Ven moved to activate his security protocols. You'll both be contained until we can study this connection and find a way to reverse it. Lyra felt Theron's signal through their link. Now, moving in perfect synchronization, they both touched the small artifacts they'd brought back from the facility. The neural technology responded instantly, creating a localized field that temporarily disrupted the Institute's systems. Director, Theron's voice was almost gentle. You cannot contain evolution. You cannot stop species from reaching out to each other, from growing beyond their original limitations. The lights flickered as security systems went haywire. In the confusion, Lyra and Theron made their way to the door. The artifacts will be found, Lyra called back to the stunned director. And when they are, those who find them will need guides who understand what they're going through. They moved through the Institute's corridors with purpose, their linked minds coordinating their escape perfectly. Guards found their systems malfunctioning. Doors opened before they reached them, and every obstacle seemed to dissolve in their path. The ship. Lyra asked through their connection, though she already knew Theron's answer. Prepped and ready, he confirmed. I took the liberty of making arrangements while you were distracting the director with your emotional appeals. She sent him a wave of amused affection. You're learning to be quite the rebel for an Aetheri scientist. And you're developing an appreciation for careful planning, he returned, his scales shifting through colors of warmth. Perhaps we're both evolving. They reached the Institute's docking bay, just as the backup systems began to recover. Their small research vessel waited, its engines already humming with life. Through their neural link, they could feel other artifacts awakening across the galaxy, calling to others who were ready to take the same leap they had. They'll try to stop us, Lyra noted as they boarded, working in perfect tandem to prep for launch. The Institute, the Galactic Council, they'll all see this as a threat to their power. Let them try. Theron's confidence flowed through their connection. They don't understand what we've discovered. This isn't just about neural bridges or sharing consciousness. It's about what species can become when they stop fearing their differences. The docking bay doors began to close, but they were already moving. Their shared consciousness made piloting the ship effortless, each of them instinctively knowing what the other would do, working as one mind with two bodies. As they broke through the Institute's security field and into open space, Lyra felt something new through their connection. A sense of purpose, of destiny, stronger than anything she'd experienced before. Looking at Theron, she saw his scales shifting through colors that matched her emotions perfectly. "Where to?" she asked, though she could already feel his answer forming in their shared consciousness. "There's another artifact site awakening in the Carina sector," he replied. "Someone there will need our help understanding what's happening to them." After that, his scales rippled with anticipation. "We follow the network wherever it leads us." Lyra smiled, feeling his excitement merge with her own. Leading an evolutionary revolution wasn't exactly what I expected when I started studying ancient artifacts. And I never expected to find myself agreeing with human intuition. Theron's mandibles clicked in amusement. Yet here we are, about to change the course of galactic history. Their ship jumped to hyperspace, leaving behind the old order and racing toward a future where the boundaries between species were no longer barriers but bridges waiting to be built. 6 months after their escape from the Institute, Lyra and Theron stood before the largest gathering of linked pairs in galactic history. The grand chamber of the abandoned facility they'd discovered in the Carina sector now hosted over 200 beings, humans, etheri, and dozens of other species, all connected through neural bridges. Through their own connection, Lyra felt Theron's quiet satisfaction as they observed the pairs working together, their linked consciousness creating new forms of art, science, and understanding that neither species could have achieved alone. "They're adapting even faster than we did," she noted, watching the human Meridian pair manipulate quantum fields with their combined consciousness. "Each new pair seems to discover capabilities we hadn't even imagined." "Evolution rarely follows a predictable path," Theron replied, his scales shifting through colors of pride and contemplation, especially when it involves human unpredictability. Their success in helping other pairs had come at a cost. The Galactic Council had officially declared neural bridging technology illegal, forcing them and their growing community underground. But trying to stop the spread of the artifacts had proved impossible. They seemed to have a way of finding those who were ready for them. A sudden ripple of excitement passed through the gathered pairs. The facility's central crystal matrix, far larger than any they'd previously encountered, had begun to pulse with new energy. Lyra and Theron moved closer, their linked consciousness already interpreting the patterns. "It's time," Theron announced, his voice carrying through the chamber. "The network is complete. Enough pairs have formed to activate the final protocol." The crystal matrix erupted with light, projecting a vast holographic display that filled the chamber. Star maps, quantum formulae, and flowing scripts merged into a single unified message that all the linked pairs could understand. "It's beautiful," Lyra whispered, though the words seemed inadequate. Through their neural bridge, she and Theron began to comprehend the true scope of what the artifact creators had planned. "Not just communication," Theron explained to the gathered pairs, his thoughts merging with Lyra's as they shared their understanding. "Not just understanding. They were building toward a moment when enough species could truly connect, truly work together. Because what's coming requires all of us." The holographic display shifted, showing a threat approaching from intergalactic space, a wave of energy that would fundamentally alter the galaxy's quantum structure. The artifact creators had seen it coming, had known their civilizations wouldn't survive to face it, so they'd left behind the tools for future species to evolve into something that could. "The neural bridges," Lyra continued, "they're not just between pairs. They're preparing us to link all of our consciousnesses together, to become something entirely new, something that can survive what's coming and guide our civilizations through the change." A murmur of both excitement and apprehension rippled through the gathered pairs. The idea of joining their consciousness on such a scale was both thrilling and terrifying. "It's your choice," Theron addressed them, his scales shifting through reassuring colors. "Each pair must decide for themselves what we're attempting. There's no precedent for it. We'll be exploring entirely new territory." Lyra felt his momentary hesitation through their link and squeezed his hand. "But then," she added with a smile, Exploring new territory is what brought us all here in the first place, isn't it? One by one, the pairs stepped forward, touching the crystal matrix. Each connection added to the growing neural network, creating something greater than the sum of its parts. Lyra and Theron watched as colors no human had ever seen merge with mathematical concepts no Aetheri had imagined, creating new forms of thought and understanding. When every pair had joined, they stepped forward together. Through their deep connection, they knew this was what they'd been preparing for since that first moment in the Institute's corridor. As they touched the matrix, their consciousness expanded to encompass the entire network. The experience defied description. They were themselves, yet they were also everyone, their combined knowledge and understanding expanding beyond anything single species could comprehend. Through this unified consciousness, they could see the approaching quantum wave not as a threat, but as an opportunity for transformation. The artifact creators. Lyra's voice merged with Theron's in the shared consciousness. They weren't just leaving us technology. They were showing us the next step in cosmic evolution. The quantum wave would reach them in less than a year, but now, linked together, they could prepare their civilizations for the change. Not through force or fear, but through understanding and connection. Each linked pair would become a bridge, helping others adapt and evolve. As the unified consciousness settled into a stable configuration, Lyra and Theron found themselves back in their individual forms, though now permanently part of something far greater. Through their neural bridge, they shared a moment of profound appreciation for how far they'd come from their first skeptical encounters. A human xenoarchaeologist and an Aetheri scientist. Theron mused, his scales showing colors of joy that only Lyra could fully appreciate. Who would have thought we'd end up helping guide the next stage of galactic evolution? Lyra smiled, feeling his emotions mirror her own through their connection. Well, you did say human persistence was fascinating to observe. I was wrong, he admitted, his mandibles clicking in amusement. It wasn't just fascinating. It was exactly what we needed to break through the boundaries holding us back. Around them, the linked pairs began to disperse, each heading out to different sectors of space to prepare for the coming change. But they were never truly separate now, all connected through the network they'd created together. Ready to continue defying impossible odds? Lyra asked, though she could already feel his answer through their bond. Theron's scales shifted through the deep purple that had become his signature color of acceptance. With you. Always. After all, his upper eyes blinked in sequence. Someone has to keep your human impulsiveness in check. Their laughter echoed through both the chamber and the neural network, a sound of joy and hope that transcended species, space, and time itself. The boundaries between them had long since dissolved, replaced by something far more profound, a connection that would help guide their galaxy into a new age of evolution and understanding.